1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, we're grappling with the text, the seventh commandment, with a cookie. From a field. Pastor Wolfmuller, are you just going to read sections of the Large Catechism on the seventh commandment and eat a cookie? Answer? Yeah, because I cannot, and with my imagination, cannot think of anything better to do, any better good work than hearing from Dr. Martin Luther about the seventh commandment. So here we are, the economics of Luther. I got my purple pen. After your person, fifth commandment, you shall not kill, and spouse, sixth commandment, you shall not commit adultery. Temporal property comes next. Seventh commandment, you shall not steal. That also God wishes to have protected. Now, notice that God is the protector, and I think there's a lot actually to be said here, that we are, that God is with the commandments, He is a defender. And we are also defenders of the Lord's gifts. In fact, the ancient church, they were called the defenders of the faith. There's something there. Here, the Lord is defending property. And He has commanded that no one shall subtract from or curtail his neighbor's possessions. For to steal, you shall not steal, is nothing else than to get possession of another's property wrongfully, which briefly comprehends all kinds of advantage in all sorts of trade to the disadvantage of our neighbor. So the seventh commandment is what determines Christians' economics. Now, this indeed is a quite widespread and common vice, but so little regarded and observed that it exceeds all measure. Watch this, typical Luther. So that if all who are thieves and yet do not wish to be called such were to be hanged on gallows, the world would soon be devastated, and there would be a lack of both executioners and gallows. You would run, if you were hanging all the thieves, you would run out of rope, says Luther. Furthermore, in the market and common trade, likewise, this practice is in full swing and force to the greatest extent, where one openly defrauds another with bad merchandise, false measures, weights coins by the nimbleness and queer finances or dexterous tricks, takes advantage of him. Now, note here that when it comes to money and the seventh commandment, that we're not supposed to be tricky, but to be honest, forthright, and not try to take advantage of people, but in fact to bless them. When one overcharges a person in a trade, wantonly drives a hard bargain, skins and distresses him, who can recount or think of all of these things? To sum it up, this is the commonest craft and the largest guild on earth. And if we regard the world throughout all conditions of life, it is nothing else than a vast, wide stall full of great thieves. This is great. So Luther looks at the world and he sees, let's see, there's France, and here's Africa, here's Florida, And he sees the whole thing. He says, this is nothing more than a trough of thieves. Luther, could preach the law. There's more. Yes, here we might be silent about the trifling individual thieves if we were to attack the great, powerful arch-thieves with whom lords and princes keep company, who daily plunder not only a city or two, but all of Germany. Yea, where should we place the head and supreme protector of all thieves, the holy chair at Rome, with all its word I don't know how to pronounce, which has grabbed by theft the wealth of all the world and holds it to this day. So here he's talking about the arch thieves, which eat with kings, and the greatest thief of all, which is the Pope, by his selling of indulgences, bleeds dry the whole country. Now, what we notice here is that we normally think of theft, and we think of the kid who steals a candy bar or something like this, but theft is a huger sort of thing. In fact, if I take $1, and I take it home, and I put that $1 under my pillow, and then I get it out 20 years later, and all of a sudden that $1 only buys 50 cents worth of something. Then I realize, wait, somebody, in fact, stole half of that $1 from me. Who did that? Well, yeah, you can answer that question. Now, since this commandment is so far-reaching and comprehensive, as just indicated, it's necessary to urge it well and to explain it to the common folk, not to let them go on in their wantonness and security. So wantonness, not paying attention to things, security, thinking that we're safe because we have, always to place before their eyes the wrath of God. we remember that the Lord punishes his commandments. And this section of Luther here is something that I'm wrestling with and trying to get my own head around, and I would commend to you. That Luther understands that God in fact intervenes, that God acts, that God sees theft, and he is not ignorant of it, and he does not ignore it. And so the wrath of God, which is what we say when we say we should fear and love God, etc. This is the fear of God, knowing that he's angry when we break his commandments. To place before their eyes the wrath of God and inculcate the same. For we have to preach this not to Christians who are naturally by the Holy Spirit, not naturally, but spiritually or generous, but chiefly to knaves and scoundrels to whom it would be more fitting for judges, jailers, or Master Hans the executioner to preach. Therefore let everyone know that it is his duty, at the risk of God's displeasure, not only to do no injury to his neighbor, nor deprive him of gain, nor to perpetrate any act of unfaithfulness or malice in any bargain or trade, but faithfully to preserve his property for him, to secure and promote his advantage, especially when one accepts money, wages, and one livelihood for such services. So that we're looking at our neighbor's stuff. Here's our neighbor's, possessions, his bag of money, and we're saying, how can we help that get bigger, and not how can we take from it? And why are we doing this? Not simply out of love for our neighbor, but out of love for God and out of fear of God. That this commandment, you shall not steal, doesn't come from the neighbor, but it comes from God. There's more. Don't panic. Look at all this. No more shall all the rest prosper who change the open free market into a carrion pit of extortion and a den of robbery, where the poor are daily overcharged, new burdens, high prices are imposed, everyone uses the market according to his caprice, and is even defiant, and brags as though it were his fair privilege and right to sell his goods for as high a price as he pleased, and no one had a right to say a word against it. Now this is interesting to consider this economically, if Luther's saying that we ought to have prices on goods and everything like this, but he says when the Christian goes to engage in the open, free market, he does so not only for his own gain, but especially for the sake of his neighbor. We will indeed look on and let these people skin, pinch, and hoard, but we Christians, we will trust in God, who will, however, do this of his own accord, that after you have been skinning and scraping for a long time, he will pronounce such a blessing on your gains that your grain in the garner, your beer in the cellar, your cattle in the stalls shall perish. In other words, we think that having wealth and riches is simply a matter of our own work, and we forget that, in fact, it is the Lord who gives these things, There are more than one cause to things. So there is the cause of work, but there is especially the cause of God. Where you have cheated and overcharged anyone to the amount of a florin, your entire pile shall be consumed with rust, so that you will never enjoy it. So that as we go and engage in trade and in work and in economics and all this sort of stuff, we're doing it not just to gather up into barns all this riches, but that we would have some joy in it. And the way that we have joy in it is through being generous. So, let this suffice as an explanation of what stealing is, that it is not to be taken too narrowly, but made to extend as far as we have to do with our neighbors, and briefly, in summary, as in the former commandments. It is herewith forbidden, in the first place, to do our neighbor any injury or wrong in whatever manner supposable by curtailing, forestalling, or withholding his possessions and property, or to consent to allow such a thing, but to interpose and prevent it. So not only is the negative forbidden of taking, but we are to step in and do something positive. On the other hand, it is commanded that we advance and improve his possessions, so that our concern is our neighbor's possessions. Now, who of us is not condemned by this? And in case he suffers wants, we help, communicate, and lend both to friends and also to foes. Remember, Jesus says, love your enemy. Do good to those who persecute you. Last, whoever now seeks and desires good works will here find more than enough, surely and heartily acceptable and pleasing to God. And in addition, are favored and crowned with excellent blessings, that we are to be richly compensated for all that we do for our neighbor's good and from friendship. As King Solomon teaches, Proverbs 19:17, he that hath pity upon the poor lendeth to the Lord, and that which he hath given him he will pay him again. Now this is worth meditating on. That here Luther goes to Proverbs and sees the proverb, the promise, that the one who has pity on the poor and lends, in other words, cares, gives to the poor, and serves the poor, does it unto the Lord. So that we are acting not only before the Lord and in fear of God, but when we look around us and we serve our neighbor, we realize that we are serving the Lord, we are loving the Lord by the loving of our neighbor. And the Lord is paying attention to this sort of stuff, and He will pay him again. The Lord gets back to you. Here, then, you have a rich Lord, who is certainly sufficient for you. We think our riches are outside of the Lord or apart from the Lord, but the Lord is sufficient. And He will not suffer you to come short in anything or to want. Thus you can with a joyful conscience enjoy 100 times more than you could scrape together with unfaithfulness and wrong. Now, whoever does not desire the blessing will find wrath and misfortune enough. So how do we engage in economics? How do we go out and work in the world? Well, we work hard, but we also are working with an eye towards generosity and towards kindness, knowing that, we're always afraid to give money away, to serve and be generous. But here, Luther reminds us that when we serve and love our neighbor, the Lord will provide for us all that we need. And especially, He provides for us a joyful heart, so that when He gives to us, we receive from Him, that it comes to our heart with great joy, with kindness. We receive the gifts from Him with joy. And if you don't, you could be rich, but you find wrath and misfortune enough, because nothing satisfies you. All right, I did what I said. Oh, I forgot to eat a cookie. Oh yeah. We got to do something else. These guys are starting a new show. Well, you can click there to like the show. Click here, and Peter will make a link to the new show. Eh, Peter? It's going to be exciting stuff. I'm looking forward to watching. Maybe they'll let me come on sometime.
Worldview Everlasting is solid, Christian, and free because it is viewer supported. Your monthly gift of $5, $10, or $25 is the reason that we can continue to improve and expand these tools for online Christian outreach and discipleship. To make a one-time donation, sign up for the Lutheran Ninja Clan regular giving, or to find information about how to put Worldview Everlasting in your congregation's budget, click Donate Now.
Trying to get crumbs on the new show.